Andrei, thank you for taking time to talk to us again. As I was saying to you a few moments ago, the last time I saw you, we were in Tallinn, Estonia, and you were in a hallway. You were working on your computer, and you said, I'm trying to avoid some people." And so it turns out, not long after that, um, Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin announced that you're now on the most wanted list. Did you know about that then, back in May?
No, I didn't. I got this news only in June, and to be honest, the interesting thing is that I was never officially informed that I was put on this list, and I'm accused of spreading fake news about the war in Ukraine. I got this news thanks to my banks in Moscow. They first sent me these text messages informing me that now I owe thousands and thousands of dollars in euros. And firstly, I thought it was some phishing attack on me because there was a link provided, well, all the way it usually goes. But after that, I got a new message with a number of a criminal case opened against me. And after that, I talked to some people in Moscow, and my lawyer actually checked this information. And indeed, it was true. I actually was accused of spreading fake news and was put on the wanted list.
Well, this is not good news, and I think I sent you a note at the time, expressing concern for you and your family because, you
Yeah,
know,
thank you.
this kind of thing is something that we know that the Kremlin has done in the past with others, and they can be pretty relentless when they do this kind of thing. So, I guess first, I just want to ask if you are you okay, and how are things?
Well, I am okay. I'm in London, but you're absolutely right. It's not only about me, it's also about my relatives, and I have a family in Moscow. And of course, my thoughts are with them. And of course, we took some precautions, but still, we know that you're absolutely right, what we are capable of. And that is why I need to think about that a bit more. And also, it's about this wanted list. It's a national wanted list, but also international. So in the countries which recognize Russian requests, I might be arrested and immediately deported to Russia. And the list of the countries I was strongly advised not to go is quite long. So it's not just Russia or Belarus. It's about some other countries. So yes, I see that this unfortunate development actually has some impact on my work.
How long? And I know this is probably a ridiculous question to ask, but I'm asking this because I think I know the answer you're going to give me, and it's forever, at least until there's no more Vladimir Putin. The thing I was going to ask is, how long do you think this is going to last?
Yes, it looks like it's all about Vladimir Putin. Officially, my criminal case suggests that I might be put behind bars for up to 10 years. So it's a really long time. And the warrant issued says that I should be immediately arrested if I found myself in Russia. And actually, everybody, I'm not the only journalist who got accused of spreading fake news, and we all now exchanging news and gossip about what is going on. And yes, that's pretty much what we think. What we think is that it might end only with Vladimir Putin out of the Kremlin.
Yeah. So, some other questions I wanted to get to. I noticed you wrote a piece, you and Irina, and by the way, you guys are great, great team. Your work is very, very good and very insightful, and you know this, and you don't need me to tell you this. But I noticed you wrote a piece yesterday titled Prisoner Swaps, Putin Style. And you say that Westerners can expect to be arrested because Putin is trying to increase the number of Westerners in his custody for trades. I think like the trades like the one proposed for Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan. Um, where did you arrive at that conclusion?
Yeah, yes, unfortunately, it's what I think is going to happen. The problem is that we have this image in our minds that Vladimir Putin is a big fan of the Soviet Union, has been always obsessed with the Cold War and with the KGB and all that, which includes spy swaps, which took place in the 1950s and 60s, and I think the last one was in the late 1980s. The problem is that Vladimir Putin has been in power for a really long period of time, and now he has his own history of swaps and exchanges. And the problem is that he developed his own strategy and tactics, and he started doing this back in the late 1990s when we still had a war in Chechnya. And back then, Chechens, as a rule, they kidnapped a lot of people because we wanted to get the prisoners from Russian prisons. The strategies Russian officials developed back then was to form a bank of hostages. So just to arrest people to be exchanged for Chechens in the future. So the longer list you have of these people who might be potentially or would be potentially exchanged, the better for you. And Vladimir Putin was part of his schemes. He knew this, and he participated in these negotiations with the Chechens. So he knew that it's going to work, and it worked pretty well for the Russians. And then he, in the middle of and the late of 2000s, he applied the same tactics, dealing with the other countries. For instance, we did mention that in our article, but we had this example. Probably you remember in 2004, Russian assassins went to Qatar, and they killed vice president of Chechnya, Yandarbiyev. And back then, the Americans helped, and these guys were arrested by Qatari authorities. So what Putin did, he immediately created his own hostages. What he did, he stopped some Qatari sportsmen in Moscow and immediately threw them in the Russian prison. And that was his way to talk to the Qatari authorities. Like, if you want to get your athletes back, please give me my assassins. And he won. He got back his people. And that's exactly what he's doing right now. He's building his bank of hostages because he needs to get his people out of prisons in Europe and the United States, in the UK. And we all know that he has lots of people there. His hackers, his assassins, and it looks like he believes, at least, that he can actually win in this game. He knows how to play it.
Yeah. Speaking of assassins, just briefly, do you think he has those kinds of people in the U.S.? We're pretty clear he does have people in London and certain countries around the world where he can call on. You think folks like that exist in the U.S.?
Well, at least we have several mysterious cases in the United States. There was a very prominent Russian official, the Minister of Media, Mikhail Lesin, and he was killed in Washington, D.C. And it's still a big mystery. It looks like he was bitten to death by some people. And the problem was and is that everybody knew in Moscow that Lenin was a very prominent guy. He knew a lot, and it looks like he wanted to stay in the United States. And this thing is enough to start Putin's paranoia. We all know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of which, that's what I wanted to get to next. Putin's paranoia. What have you learned about that recently? We talked several months ago about just how paranoid he was then. Where do you think he sits and stands now in terms of his paranoia?
Well, right now it looks like the Russian society and the country is getting adjusted with new reality of being in a war. And many people in the country understand by now that it's going to be a really long war. It might last for years, not for months. And this long war brings with itself this new mentality, a war mentality, that you are surrounded by enemies, that you need to have your people constantly mobilized because you are at war with so many countries around you. Like almost everybody now attacks Russia, and you need to be united, and you need to get rid of your traitors and all of that. So what we've seen for the last 5 months, 4 months, is that the Russian security services are getting much more aggressive. Well, they were quite aggressive even before the war started. We all know that. But nevertheless, what we see now is unprecedented, I would say. We all, back before the war, we all love to compare the Russian security services with the KGB because Vladimir Putin is a former KGB man. But to be honest, what we see now is more comparable with Stalin's security services, not the KGB. It's much more aggressive, and we do not have mass repressions yet. But what we see something which is quite different from targeted repressions, selective repressions. If before the war you might have some people who found themselves on the wrong side because they were troublemakers, and that's why they were attacked and either killed or poisoned or sent to jail. Now we see people who are absolutely apolitical, doctors, for instance, or officials who fail to secure import substitution of Western technologies with Russian technologies, which sometimes is just unfeasible. It's impossible to do. Nevertheless, the FSB is after these people, and that reminds me of Stalin.
Yeah, it certainly does. And before we get into a little bit more detail about this new police state, what have you seen or learned about Putin's own personal paranoia about his own situation? There was some talk months ago about a possible assassination plot. What have you learned about his situation since then, his own personal feelings?
Well, first of all, Vladimir Putin loves talking about failed assassination attempts on him. As far as I remember, it's something about 12 or 15 maybe. And he's a bit proud of this. And by the way, it is one of the justifications he provides to the Russian people why he is so secretive about his children and his personal life. That is why his officials never respond to these questions about his wife and his daughters and where they live actually. And it looks like he is still quite isolated from his officials. He still, if he wants to meet people, well, security comes first. It is absolutely clear. He still believes that if he needs to appoint some people to some prominent positions, it's better to choose among his bodyguards. And we all know that he has 2 security services looking after his personal security, the Federal Protection Service and the Service of Protection of the President. and he choose people for the positions in prominent ministries among these people. So for him, loyalty matters more than competence and professionalism. That is absolutely clear, and we see that it's getting worse. So he's getting more paranoid.
Yeah. You were talking about how this paranoia has led to this police state, which is getting more and more difficult for people in Russia to navigate. I read in your piece, people are being rounded up. There's a special border guard order, and they're engaged in interrogations. And people who live outside of Russia, their families might be targeted internally. You say that at this point things haven't gotten really aggressive. How far do you think they would go with this process, or this idea?
Well, first of all, this war, of course, is a big crisis for Putin and for his security services. When these kind of people find themselves in a crisis, they immediately try to look for an idea, for a solution in their past. Sometimes they go as far as the KGB, but sometimes when the crisis is really big, and that's exactly what we have now, they go to something which happened under Stalin. For instance, they needed to develop really quick some strategy what to do on the occupied territories of Ukraine. And they immediately came up with the idea to imitate what Stalin security services did in the late 1940s. We need to build these huge filtration camps. And they did. And we all know why they did that, not because of their concerns that Ukrainian civilians might pose any kind of threat, but because they need to recruit people. They need to create very quickly the networks of informants in Ukraine. And for that, they need people. And the best way to do that is through filtration camps. That's the best option. They also used this approach in Chechnya, and again, it was quite successful. So now we see this dangerous combination of two things: of the experience of Stalin security services, which was absolutely horrible, of course, and also of the experience of in Chechnya, which Vladimir Putin witnessed by himself. So the combination of two brutal approaches, that is exactly what we see right now applying to Ukraine and to Russia.
That's absolutely mind-blowing, but it is absolute truth. I see exactly what you're saying. Just looking back through my mind into history that I've read and learned about, that is absolutely what's happening with these camps. And I see this every day in talking to sources from Ukraine and reading some of the accounts. There are people that are being recruited essentially to help Putin. But, Richard Moore from MI6 said a couple of weeks ago in an interview that he believes that Russia's war effort is running out of steam. I heard you say a little earlier that Putin and Russians are preparing for a long war. So how do you square those two, what you're seeing and what Moore is saying? Is he saying they're running out of steam in the short term?
It's a good question. The problem is that, yes, nobody actually expects, and even the Kremlin doesn't expect a quick victory. Even people who are very pro-war right now in Russia, and the people I talk to in the security services and in the army, they understand now that the best we can achieve might be some territories, some parts of Ukraine, but not Kiev, not what we expected to get in the beginning of this war. They also understand that what they face is not only the Ukrainian army. Of course, that provides them with some excuse not to achieve the victory they were promised. And it looks like what we can get there is something reminiscent to the Iraq-Iran war of the 1980s, when you have something which was very similar to the First World War, but fought with the armies of the late 20th century. And it might, well, back then it lasted how long? Well, 10 years. Unfortunately, now I'm thinking that it might be something like that, because yes, right now it looks like the most professional units of the Russian army are completely decimated. And that is why we have this new initiative, especially in Russian regions, to form new military units filled with volunteers with no military experience and no training at all. But the problem is that the cost of life in Russia is, especially in regions, is not very high. People, especially with the new economic circumstances, and it's a big crisis actually, people are ready to go to Ukraine and to kill and get killed for money, because it gives them this opportunity to make some money. And we have a lot of such people, unfortunately, which means that human resources, not very competent, not very professional, with maybe not the best technology, but nevertheless, they are available to the Kremlin, and they might be available for many, many years.
Last thing, Andrei, what is the status of Russia's intelligence services? When we spoke before, there was a big issue going on with Sergei Beseda and some other people from the FSB. Has that settled yet? What's the situation with that?
No, it's still a big problem, especially because we see the military intelligence playing a bigger role. And first, the military intelligence went to Ukraine. Well, because we got this big one, you need to have military intelligence involved, and the FSB was more about political intelligence. But it looks like now the military intelligence are getting bigger and bigger and more ambitious. For instance, when the Russians went to Turkey to have these talks about Ukraine, we spotted several military intelligence people there. Not the FSB people were present, but military intelligence generals were there, which means that they have a say in something which is far beyond the area of expertise. It's not about tactical intelligence in Ukraine. It's about international relations with Ukraine and with Turkey and with some other countries. So these people are getting more prominent, more ambitious. The FSB also, of course, is active. And it looks like the military counterintelligence units now are the most active, because they are actually in charge of the filtration camps. And they're also in charge of making sure that the military are still loyal. So you have this difficult relationship developing between the military and the FSB, but the stakes are much higher than they were before the war.
Yeah, very interesting. Andrei, anything you want to add before we sign off this time?
No, it's up to you, of course.
Well, of course, I could talk for 6 years, but we don't have that kind of time. But thank you as always. Your work is impeccable. So is the
Thank
work
you.
of Irina and your team. Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
And I look forward to talking to you again in the not too distant future about this new and some new information, because you constantly are ahead of the rest of us by leaps and bounds. And I hope you continue with that, and good luck with everything.
Thank you very much, JJ.